or to say this is how you handle a certain situation. If you know a person's dying, and they come up to you and say, "Listen, I'm dying. All right, how do I handle the situation?" And then when you go home, do you go, do you go home and you say, I shouldn't have given them that advice, or I should have given them a better advice?
There are always moments where you second guess yourself. One of the tricks is that you never advise, you guide.
Okay.
So I'm never going to say to someone, well, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this.
Right.
I'm going to try to meet them where they are. Okay, what have you been doing? Okay, well, it hasn't been working. This is how you're feeling. So have you ever thought of trying anything else? Is there something else you want to do? And sort of brainstorm together, because it's not my death. You know, it's not my experience, it's not my story. So I have to sort of meet the people where they are. So yeah, most of us don't ever give hardcore advice. We help you find the thing that's the best for you. So yeah, there's always moments you're going to second guess. You're human too, where you think, oh, maybe I should have. But in the end, you focus on the good that you do.
Well, that's a good thing, because I always wondered how because I know counselors see other counselors. I'm sure you see other counselors because of your experience as well. Is that true, that you have to see a counselor for yourself?
You don't have to, but what starts to happen is, especially doing this work, most of the people who do this work got into it because they lost somebody they loved. You know, this is definitely a calling. It isn't something you're going to see a lot of academic programs on, or, you know, there isn't a lot of training.
And you're not going to say, oh, I'm going to be a grief counselor so I can get rich.
Yeah, no, you're definitely not going to say that. You do it because you were meant to. And so we do form a tight-knit community, so it winds up being group therapy whenever you have a staff meeting, just because you all lost somebody, and every loss that you help reminds you of the loss that you suffered. And so you wind up helping each other through.
Well, that's good. That's a good thing. Yes. Okay, thank you, Hector. So, anyway, those were good questions. Sure.
Very good.
If there's anyone else that would like to come up, feel free. In the meantime, so we've covered quite a bit of this subject. So, do you have people that are coming to you that have somebody that they know they're going to lose soon, and how do you handle that? That they haven't lost the person yet, but it's inevitable.
Right. You sort of focus on what we call anticipatory grief. Like, someone in your life gets a terminal diagnosis.
Right.
It's inevitable. There's no cure. You understand that. You start grieving the day the diagnosis comes in.
Exactly.
And so we treat it like any other loss. You are suffering. Every day is a loss, because every day you live with this anticipation that it's one day less with them. And
you
so,
kind of really spoil the time you have left by not being able to enjoy that person with what little time they have with you.
yeah, and one of the hardest things about having someone suffer a long lingering illness where you're anticipating the death is that when the death happens, it often feels anticlimactic, because you've been grieving this whole time, that when they die, it doesn't quite have the impact you expect it to have. And
Because you've been expecting it?
because you've been grieving. But that often spirals people back, because they think, I'm not wailing, I'm not crying, I'm not more upset. Oh my
What's
God,
wrong
somebody
with me?
Right, and you don't realize that you've been grieving for months.
Yeah, so you've gotten a lot of the process down already.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because it takes, it's a certain amount of time that you have that you really go through the bad grieving, and then it gets a little bit better and a little bit better until you can remember the person fondly and smile when you think of them, instead of sitting there with crying.
Right. And that takes time. That's the only thing that's going to help, is just time and support.
Time and support, yeah. And they do say that after a while, when you've had a big loss, after a while, you do remember them and smile and just remember the good stuff, you know? And we have Dan. Dan would like to ask a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I came in a little late. I didn't see much of the show.
He came in after the movie started.
No, it's okay.
But I lost my wife after 41 years, 3 years ago. And I find that, I'm still hurting. Does it get any easier
Yeah.
does the hurting get easier? I know I'll always miss her, but you know.
Yeah, it gets less intense. It's probably less intense than it was
When it
in the
first
very
happened.
beginning. You just don't notice it because it's still there. It's like this chronic ache that you have that you
Yeah.
can't get rid of. It's always going to be there to a degree, but it gets easier to cope with. It's never going to go away completely because you're never going to have her back.
Right.
So you're always going to have a certain element of hurt, but through time, it's just not going to be as prominent as it is. You know, there'll be days you don't even think about it. And it will get a little bit easier. I wish I could give you a timeline. Everybody's different. Every situation is different. But it does get a little easier. It's never going to be good, but it gets a little better.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Dan. Thank you for your question. Anyway, so, all right, well, you know, it's the truth. It's the truth. Losing a loved one, whether it be a human, human or an animal that you were close to, is never easy. It's always leaves something with you, and and we have somebody else coming up to ask the question. Oh, okay, here comes Rosanna. Okay, good. Hey, Rosanna.
Hi.
Well, you can
I'm
bring
Ki-
that down if you want.
No, I'm fine.
You're
I can
fine?
just tilt it. I'm
Okay,
fine.
very good.
Okay, my question is, a lot of times we get very attached to pets. We call them our furry babies, and we love them very dearly. And something can happen. You had to move, you had to give the pet away, or the pet got away from you, or you've just lost that pet from your life. How do you counsel someone to deal with the loss of a pet? Because it's a very dear loss, but it's a different kind of loss than losing an actual person in your life. Because I know I've lost pets that I've missed more than some of the people I've lost in my life.
Right.
That's true.
How do you tell them to deal with that? What kind of skills do you tell them, or advice do you give them to guide them through that grief?
Same thing as losing a loved one. Tell me
Okay.
about your pet. What did they mean to you? What was the kind of relationship you had? So once you talk to me about the place this animal had in your life, then I'm going to tell you the same kind of coping skills I would say to someone who lost a parent or a sibling or a partner. It's the same idea because you're losing a relationship. So what are you losing? You know, are you losing the person who greeted you every day? Are you losing the source of unconditional love that you had that you could always count on?
Right.
So yeah, we use the same coping skills as you use for people.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, because
Thank
loss
you.
is loss. Yeah.
Thank you. That actually helps me. Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm glad.
I'm
You're
glad,
welcome.
Rosanna. I'm glad.
Thank you.
Glad you came tonight. Yeah. Anyway, though, I'm glad that we have everyone coming up. And,
That's great.
Yeah, it is great because everybody's interested in the subject. This is a subject that does catch people's attention because of the fact that, like I said before, it's something that we all deal with. We all have to deal with the loss of others, and we have to deal with the loss of ourselves from this earth at some point in time. Nobody gets out of here alive,
No, they don't.
right?
Most definitely.
So we're all going to be going someday, and we can only hope. What about people who are going, and how would you recommend somebody prepare their loved ones to have less of an impact when they're gone? I mean, I know if I knew I was going, I'd be talking to my family and saying things like, "Please don't be upset. I'll be right there. You'll see me. We'll be together again because your time will come. Between now and 100 years." So I mean, you don't really want people to be grieving for you. You know, you don't want them to be. It's not your idea of fun to watch your loved ones crying all the time because you're not there.
Right. I wish you could prepare them. You can say all of that, and in the end, the second you're gone,
They're going to be crying.
they're going to grieve anyway.
Yeah.
One of the most important things, I think, within a family when someone is dying is honesty. You have to let the people in your life know what's going on. So many people who are terminal don't want to upset their loved ones, and you rob them of that time.
I know I have a lady friend who's who's elderly, and her son. They did not tell her. The family didn't tell her how sick he was. She's in her mid-80s, and he was in his early 60s, and they never told her. And then all of a sudden he's gone, and she's like in complete shock.
Yeah.
You know, because they told her that he had diabetes. They didn't tell her he had cancer. You know, and it was, you know, and so she's like walking around like numb because she never expected it. You don't expect, no matter how old you are and how old your children are, you don't expect them to go before you.
Of course not.
You know, and no matter how old you are, if one of your children who is also very much into adulthood dies, you are just as affected as if you were a young parent of a 5-year-old that died.
Right, right.
You know, it's not any different.
Right. And so you treat it the exact same way. You know, it's a sad thing.
Sometimes, well, they do say that there are different degrees, like losing a parent is not as bad as losing a child. You lose a child, and that's like the worst thing. I mean, even losing a pet is horrible, but it's not like losing a child. And have you found parents of children that have passed that come to you?
Yeah. Losing a child is such a devastating thing because it disrupts our belief in the world.
Yeah, you're supposed to predecease your child.
Right. And it's also the hardest loss for society to deal with because it disrupts that world belief. And so a lot of times people who lose children feel very isolated from the community because no one wants to talk about it. It's such an unimaginable thing to happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the help they get comes from being around other parents who've lost a child because they're the only
They
people
have
who
something
get
in
it.
common. Yeah, they all
Right.
understand.
And, you know, unfortunately, as much as some people want to help, a lot of times they wind up sticking their foot in their mouth and saying things like, well, you can always have another child.
Oh yeah, like that's going to help,
Right. Or, you know, you're still young, or it
I
was
know,
just their time.
They mean well.
Right. Right.
They mean well, but they're like you said, sticking their foot in their mouth.
Right. It comes from the right place.
Yeah.
Um,
Just not the right words.
But sometimes it helps to be with someone who gets it. A lot of times, support groups work just for that reason. We always say that, you know, if you go out into the world and you've lost someone you love and people ask you how you're doing and you go, they look at you and kind of nod their head and think, okay. If you go into a bereavement group and people ask how you are and you go, they all say, exactly, I know, I'm feeling the exact same way. And so there's that
'cause
solidarity.
You know you're not alone.
Right.
You know that what you're feeling is not just you feeling that. You know that there are others. So support groups are very important. Are there any that you are affiliated with that you might want to tell our audience about?
Pat Monahan runs the adult version of the group I do, and she's been in this community for a large period of time and has helped countless individuals, and she helped me. She's the person who got me started on this work. She's the person who helped me get through the loss of my father and sort of put me on this road that I never imagined being on. And so I can definitely say that we have a very strong group at the parish that I work at, of people who not only go through the support group, but we also get together once a month and
Well, that's
catch
it.
up.
Yeah, support groups do that.
Yeah.
Like even AA and Al-Anon
Right.
and all of them, they lean on each other for support and all that kind of stuff. Tell me, where is the church?
Amboy and McGuire, Amboy Road and McGuire Avenue,
Amboy and McGuire. That is in
Pleasant Plains,
Pleasant Plains. Okay, and the name of the church again?
St. Joseph, St. Thomas.
St. Joseph, St. Thomas. Okay, so in other words, if anyone is grieving and needs a support group, they can call St. Joseph, St. Thomas and mention it, and then they can get hooked up that way.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
so if anyone needs a support group, St. Joseph, St. Thomas, and you can you can get hooked up. I know that support groups are very, very important, and they do help. Because as we said, when you're hearing people, you're sitting around a table and you're having a cup of coffee and people are talking about their stories, and sometimes their stories are worse than yours, where you come out saying, geez, you know, I feel this way, but